Imagine this, a dense African jungle, evening time, and just 40 yards in front of you, a wounded, rage-filled elephant charging straight at you. You are holding a rifle, but one mistake, 1 second too late, and it's all over. And then, not just then, a deadly lion attack you as well. Will you survive, or will this hunt become the last moment of your life? In today's story, you will witness the terrifying reality of the African jungle where the hunter becomes the hunted.
My introduction to big game hunting in Africa happened in a very dramatic way. As soon as I landed at Nairobi Airport in Kenya, I went straight to visit the national park. Later in the evening, I set off toward my destination in a car brought by my host. Our route passed through Tsavo National Park. The name Tsavo immediately reminds one of Colonel Patterson, who hunted several man-eating lions during the time the Uganda Railway was being built. In the Indian subcontinent, the man-eaters of Tsavo and Colonel Patterson became especially famous because most of the railway work was carried out by workers and craftsmen from the subcontinent, while Colonel Patterson, then Captain Patterson, served as an engineer on that very railway line. There were more than 15,000 Indian laborers living in small and large camps along the railway. No one knows how or from where, but 4 or 5 lions became man-eaters and began preying on these workers. Colonel Patterson hunted these lions with great skill, courage, and by risking his own life, and later wrote his famous book, The Man-Eaters of Tsavo, which became well known around the world. It is a book that almost every hunter has read. Colonel Patterson's memory is closely tied to this famous national park in East Africa. It's almost impossible to visit Tsavo National Park without thinking of him and his book. Anyway, to keep the story short, we were passing through the park and our car was moving rather slowly because one of its 4 tires was in terrible condition, almost worn out completely. We had only gone a short distance when a fast-moving car came roaring from behind, sped past us arrogantly, and left us in a cloud of dust. At that moment, I remember thinking to myself that God help that car if it tried to cross the park at night through the back road. My fear turned out to be true. We had barely gone another 2 miles when, in the dim headlights of our old car, we saw that same vehicle lying overturned on the road. We stopped, got out, and went to check. All 3 passengers were still inside, nursing their injuries. It turned out that while taking a turn, their car had collided with a rhino. The rhino ran off, but the car flipped over. They told us that after the accident, when they tried to get out, not just 1, but 4 lions passed by. One of them even came close to the car, sniffed it, peered through the window, flicked his tail, and then disappeared into the jungle after hearing the sound of our approaching vehicle. The 3 passengers were young English boys, engineering apprentices by profession, completely unarmed and probably seeing lions for the first time in their lives. They were utterly terrified. Anyway, we managed to turn their car upright, but the engine was almost completely destroyed from the collision with the rhino. So we had no choice but to take them into our car and drop them safely at their destination. Thank God in Africa, you are not allowed to hunt any dangerous animal unless you have at least a .375 bore Magnum rifle. When it comes to animals like elephants and rhinos, you often have to shoot from a distance of 20 yards or even less because they live in extremely dense jungle. So it's essential that your weapon is powerful enough to bring down an elephant or rhino with a single shot, or if it gets wounded and charges at you, you can stop it with a second shot. This is only possible with a heavy-bore rifle. It's no exaggeration to say that people don't go to Africa just to hunt deer or birds. They go to hunt dangerous animals like elephants, lions, rhinos, and buffalo. That's why a hunter must be fully prepared to face such powerful and dangerous creatures. The thrill of big game hunting lies in the danger. The more dangerous the animal, the greater the excitement. But that thrill should have limits. It should never cross into recklessness or suicide. When I was a child, I heard that even a tiny ant could kill an elephant if it entered its trunk. But even if I had an army of millions of ants, I would never rely on such an idea against a charging elephant, because the result would be my own quick and unpleasant death. I know that a wounded and enraged elephant can only be stopped by a perfectly placed shot, and only if that shot comes from a heavy, powerful rifle. In my earlier writings, I have mentioned old hunting guns like 4-bore, 6-bore, and 8-bore rifles. Even back then, the rule was the same: get as close as possible before firing at an elephant. Even today, with powerful rifles like the .600 bore, the same principle applies. Elephants, rhinos, and buffalo must be taken down from close range. While a lighter rifle might kill at close range, it cannot stop a charging animal if it gets wounded. So common sense demands that you carry a powerful weapon to handle any emergency. Personally, I prefer a powerful double-barrel rifle. When I went to Africa, I was fully equipped with suitable weapons: a .475 bore double-barrel express rifle, a .375 bore magazine rifle, and a .675 bore magazine rifle for dangerous big game, along with a .22 bore and a 12-bore shotgun for bird hunting. Perhaps that's why I went to Africa on my own feet and returned safely on my own feet. If I had tried to hunt elephants with only a .375 bore rifle, you might be reading my obituary instead of these experiences. I used my weapons like this: the .475 bore double-barrel express rifle for elephants and rhinos, the .375 bore for lions and buffalo, and the .675 bore for other game. The .475 bore magazine rifle was a beautifully balanced and fast weapon. It was excellent for long-range shooting, and during my stay in Africa, I used it almost daily to provide meat for the camp. However, it was this very rifle that led me into two extremely dangerous situations, moments when I truly felt I might not survive. In the early days of my trip, I was very successful. Within just a few days, I had hunted 2 elephants and 1 rhino, and I began to consider myself quite fortunate. The initial excitement of hunting had also settled down, so I decided to take a few days of rest and set up camp near a beautiful spring under the shade of baobab trees. About a mile from our camp, there was a hill. The locals told me that kudu deer lived around that area, and their horns were exceptionally beautiful. So I abandoned my plan to rest and decided to hunt a magnificent kudu instead. The next morning, the 3 of us set out toward that hill.
After moving a little further, the wounded elephant entered an area where patches of soft sand appeared here and there, places where, if you dug the ground, you could find water. Other herds of elephants were also present there. My trackers kept following the wounded elephant, but the bushes grew so dense that it became extremely difficult to pass through them. By now, I was completely tired of the idea of hunting this elephant, but I didn't want to show weakness in front of my companions, so I kept going with my rifle in hand. After a while, my companions also realized how hard it was to move through the thick bushes, so we came out and circled around from the other side. Soon, we found the elephant's tracks again. It had slipped out of the dense thicket as smoothly as a bar of soap slips from your hand. A little further on, under a cluster of trees, we found signs that the elephant had stopped there and broken some branches to eat. Then we found fresh dung, still warm to the touch. That meant the elephant was nearby and likely moved after sensing our presence. Judging by its pace, it couldn't be more than half an hour ahead of us. I checked my watch. It was 5 p.m. If we continued, we could reach it before sunset. So we ignored our hunger and thirst and pushed forward against time. Soon we heard the loud crack of a heavy branch breaking. The tracks led in that direction. I checked the wind. It was in our favor. Even so, I was certain the elephant had sensed us and, annoyed by the long pichha, was probably hiding somewhere, waiting for us. At that moment, I noticed something chilling. The jungle had gone completely silent. The silence was so deep that I could hear my own heartbeat like a drum pounding in my chest. We had just moved a little ahead when my tracker suddenly stepped to the right and signaled. There stood a very old baobab tree. From his gesture, I understood the elephant was on the other side. I had barely taken 2 steps forward when the elephant let out a deafening trumpet and charged. Its trunk was curled, its ears pinned back, and it was moving incredibly fast. Its small eyes were locked directly onto me. It was only 40 yards away. In that instant, many thoughts flashed in my mind. What if the gun misfires? What if I die? My debts, my loved ones. But there was no time to think. I raised my rifle, took aim, and fired. The bullet struck its forehead, and it felt as if a massive building had collapsed. The elephant stumbled and fell forward, face down. Only after the elephant fell did I realize the danger I had just escaped. I was trembling, drenched in sweat, and could barely light a cigarette. After smoking 2 cigarettes, I finally gathered myself enough to examine the elephant. It was a young one with modest tusks. There was also an old wound on its body, perhaps the reason it had become so aggressive. One day, although I was unwell, boredom drove me out hunting. After a while, one of my companions suddenly shouted, "Buana Simba! Sir, a lion!" I looked, and about 100 yards away stood a magnificent lion with a red mane. Without thinking, I fired. The bullet hit. The lion turned and charged towards us. It was closing the distance fast. In a few seconds, everything would be decided. I climbed onto a small mound, but my rifle was empty. The gun bearer had fled. The lion was right in front of me. At that very moment, the gun bearer's movement distracted the lion and it turned towards him. Seizing the chance, I quickly loaded another cartridge and fired. The lion, now wounded, disappeared into the jungle. Later, when it was found dead, it became clear that my final shot had struck true. This incident became a lifelong lesson for me. Even today, I keep a piece of that lion's skin, not as a charm, but as a reminder of my own mistake and how dangerous it can be to ignore the rules of hunting.
So that was the terrifying story where a hunter was walking under the shadow of death. Every single movement, a wounded elephant, a deadly lion, and one mistake that could have cost a life. This story teaches us that in the jungle, true power isn't just about weapons, it's about patience, intelligence, and making the right decisions. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, could you ever face such a dangerous hunt? I'm Sharik and you are watching ManEater Chronicles. where we bring you the most terrifying and thrilling hunting stories from around the world. Until the next story, take care.